Hello everybody, this is how to change the throttle cables on a 1980 Honda cm400t. This is also applicable to other Honda models with the 400cc or 450cc engines, the E, the A, and for years ranging from I believe 82 all the way back to 78 or 77 that use the same engine. To do this job, you're going to need some tools. This bike has some aftermarket features on it, so there's a few more tools I use than you will need if your bike is stock, but it doesn't hurt to have these around anyway. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, 14mm open-end wrench, two 10mm open-end wrenches, a ratchet with a 10mm socket on it, and a set of metric Allen wrenches. Specifically, I used a 3 and a 4 for this job. You also need your replacement push and pull throttle cables. They are not the same cable, so make sure you get the right parts, and some light oil. The first thing we need to do to change the throttle cables is to remove the carburetors from the engine block. This motorcycle is a little bit different from the standard in that it has velocity stacks and pod filters instead of the air box. It also has Allen wrench connections on the front insulator hose clamps instead of Phillips head screws, which is actually a nice feature because the Phillips head screws here tend to strip. So if you're doing this on a stock bike, you may need a Phillips head here instead of an Allen wrench, and the fitting here would also be a Phillips head instead of a hex head. But aside from that, the procedure is the same. Remove both hose clamps and separate the carburetor from the engine. On this particular one, there's also an extra bit of frame support here, which will also need to be removed. You may need to remove the seat to remove the boot on the right hand side. And at this point, should be able to drop your carburetors. Which will give you access to the throttle cable fittings here and here. You may also want to remove the fuel connection to the carburetors because it'll give you more room to maneuver them. For that, you just take a flathead screwdriver and undo the petcock fuel connection. Next, you need to take your 10mm wrench and undo the bottom nut, or nuts if you've got, this one has two with a lock nut, on the two throttle cables. You'll need 2 of them to remove jam nuts. Once you've got them loose, you can spin them off. Once you've got all the lock nuts off, you should be able to lift the cables out of their housings. Now that you've gotten the push throttle cable off, that's the front one, the pull throttle cable is next. To remove the pull throttle cable, you need to, using your hand, manually rotate the butterfly valves and then push the cable down to get it off the catch. You may find it easier to hold the throttle in an accommodating position by placing an object like a wrench inside the carburetor's butterfly valve while you work the cable free. And there it is. At this point, both throttle cables should be loose and able to be removed. The next step is to remove the handlebar, which means we need to undo the bolt that's here, which is an Allen wrench in this case. And the other one that is right here. If you're working on a stock bike, these will be Phillips heads instead of Allen wrenches. So you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver. These ones are also prone to stripping, so it may be worth your while to replace them with Allen screws while you're in the neighborhood. In this case, there's also a throttle lock on this bike, which will have to be removed as well. You also need to unplug the 2 wires here from the handlebar switch connector. To remove the throttle cables from the handlebar, you need to completely remove those 2 Phillips head or Allen bolts, depending on your particular application. At this point, you've got your 2 cable connections here, which are easily removed. Now it's time to install your new cables. Feed the cable through. And then jam the nut with the metal cable pointing this way, so you can follow, so that it helps follow your cable routing. Before you finish installing your cables, you want to lubricate them. So just take some light oil and put a couple of drops in there. And work the cable up and down to get the oil fully worked in there. This will help prolong the lifespan of the cables. While you've got your cables out here, you want to go route them the same way that the old cables were. If you don't route them exactly the same, you can end up with cables that get pinched or pulled when you rotate the forks. So if you're going around a corner, you don't want your motorcycle to throttle up or down on you without your input. So it's important to make sure you follow the correct routing. Once you've routed the cables correctly, same as you had them before, it's time to put the cables back on your hand grip here. For now, you can leave them loose like this. We'll go and adjust tension later. Go ahead and put some light oil where your hand grip goes. Before installing it on the bike. Once you've got your hand grip back on there, begin reinstalling throttle lock if applicable, the wiring that had to be unplugged, and any other items that were disassembled to get to the throttle cables. The two screws are not the same length. The shorter one goes on the front side. And the long one goes on the back side here. Don't over tighten the first one until you've got the second one in place. These act as a clamp to hold the handlebar switch in the correct spot. Once you've got them both nearly seated, then you can torque them down properly. If these are not adequately tight, you can actually spin your handlebar switch. Now that you've got your handlebar roughly reassembled, we'll come back for our final adjustments and to tie this down later. It's time to move back to the carburetors. First thing we need to do is identify which one of these cables is our pull cable and which one's our push cable. The push cable goes on this front loop right here and gets tied to this eyelet. The pull cable goes on this loop like right here and goes on the bottom eyelet. It's easy enough to figure out which is which. Simply roll the throttle as you would normally. the cables will move appropriately. So in this case, I'm pulling the throttle, and this is clearly our pull cable right here. So this one has to go in the back. There's two lock washers on this. One needs to go on the bottom and the other needs to go on the top. As before, you may find it easier to install the cable, the pull cable, by moving the butterfly valves open and placing an object such as a wrench in them so they stay in the accommodating position. And that's all there is to it. Now you've got that cable seated, you want to arrange those lock nuts. You want to arrange those lock nuts so that it's held rigidly in place. But first, let's get the push cable on as well. At this point, we can remove our wrench we had holding the butterfly valve open. The next step is to tighten them down. Once you've got them on, tighten up the nuts and jam them so they cannot spin. Alright, we're good on those. Next you're going to adjust the free play of the cables. That's done by loosening the lock nuts here, which I've already done, and then turning this or this one in or out. Turning them clockwise moves it up and gives you more slack. Turning it counterclockwise or outwards reduces the slack on individual cables. Set them so that they don't have any excess play, and then jam your lock nuts so it can't come loose again. Once you've done all that, it's time to remount the carburetors on the engine and complete your assembly. Installation is just the reverse of removal. Okay, at this point you should be all reassembled and ready to hit the road. Thanks for watching.